And now, I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Securely Empower a Remote Workforce with Citrix Technologies. I'm going to hand things over to our featured presenter today. Not only is he the CEO of one of our centers based out in Toronto, but he's also a master Citrix instructor. Halaf Haddad. Halaf, you now have the floor.
All right, well, thank you, and good afternoon or morning, everyone, depending on where in the world you happen to be. My name is Halaf Haddad, and it's my joy to spend a few minutes with you this morning/afternoon talking about Citrix Technologies and how they can help empower your remote workforce. Remote work has been a topic brewing over the last 10 to 15 years, and certainly with the current events of the past several months, it has come to the fore how important this is. As we go through today's conversation, we'll take a quick look at how we got to this point and talk about the Citrix technologies that deliver this idea of a secure digital workspace and why that matters. And then any questions that you have at the end, please, I'm more than happy to take those questions as you enter them in the chat window, and we'd love to engage with you on those questions and even beyond as we move forward. So let's start off by, first of all, looking at how we got to this point. Now, we understand that the workspace evolved. The traditional workspace, the brick and mortar that we had where people sat, and then we had the move towards a digital workspace where work then moved online. And that was one of the big promises that we were given as computers exploded. We were going to see this paperless office. Of course, the reality has been, thanks to pivot tables and whatnot, we could actually generate more paper as opposed to cutting back on trees. And as much as things like PDF, we're trying to move away from physical paper, it seems that we can't quite get away from that. So there's always been this tangible aspect to it. But more and more, as additional technologies come in, so we've had things like PDFs layer and tablet devices and portable devices, laptops and thin books and whatnot have moved us closer and closer to that. But that introduced another challenge, that the digital workspace opened us up to more and more vulnerabilities. And that's why a few years ago, Citrix decided to champion this idea of this secure digital workspace. And with their 30+ years of experience in this space, they are very well positioned to deliver a solution. So looking at those traditional spaces like the brick and mortar or the cubicle farm, one of the challenges that brought was the requirement for people to work in the space designated by the employer. So we remember perhaps fondly those days where we would commute to the office and collaborate with our colleagues. We would, the water cooler chatter, the meetings, and okay, in fairness, maybe meetings we don't miss in their entirety, but there are some useful meetings that we do miss. Even the casual meetings where it's making our way through that cubicle farm saying, hey, you got a quick minute? And something gets discussed with a colleague or two, and before long you've come up with a solution that has greatly benefited the organization. But that traditional workspace was largely constrained to the geography of the office. With the advent of the digital workspace, suddenly work was emancipated from that physical space. Now we could work wherever. And so a very popular concept in the last few years has been this work from home and the notion of telecommuting. Instead of having to spend 20, 30, 60, 90 minutes each direction traveling from home to the office, that time was now recovered for employees. And so there was this sort of a tension that has been brewing with, on the one hand, our employees now get that time back, and on the other hand, we can't keep an eye on them because they're not physically there. And what the research has borne out, what the last several months have borne out, is that not only do we find our employees more productive, generally speaking, in the work from home scenario, but they end up giving more time as well, which is, again, another caution on the whole work-life balance. I saw a fun little cartoon with a harried worker saying, I'm not sure whether I work from home or whether I live at work. So we do have to be careful to manage those lines. And that's why even this work from home has had a sort of a meta evolution into this work from, in quotation marks, home. You know, I just did air quote, which, you know, having 3 grown children, they're a lot of fun to embarrass with air quotes and trying to seem hip. Anyways, this work from home, in air quotes, the idea now that it doesn't actually have to be our physical residence. It's basically anywhere with an internet connection. As long as we can get back to where the work is to be done, that's a thing. So with the work from home, we found that there's been an increase, like I mentioned earlier, in productivity. We've seen an increase in morale, but we've also seen an increase in security threats. And that's become the next challenge as we've evolved the workspace. Now, for companies that came into 2020 not prepared to execute a work from home strategy or a telecommuting strategy, this has gotten pushed on them a little more rapidly than all, with all the shutdowns due to the pandemic and the movement and travel restrictions. Suddenly, organizations that were not headed in the direction of a digital workspace have been caught a bit flat-footed. And in the attempt to try to cobble something together, we've seen a wide range of security threats. Things now that the company no longer controls the location or the device, but all the while the company is still liable for data security and application security. We can think of things like what has become the rather notorious bane of online meetings today, the term Zoom bombing, where random bad actors will appear in Zoom meetings. Well, that was quickly resolved when people learned to apply the correct security settings to their Zoom sessions and thus eliminate that threat. But it's a constant cat and mouse game, because now that data is on the move across the internet, and the internet gives access universally to anybody with intent, good or bad, we have to provide some kind of a secure experience, because as organizations, we have to still secure our data. We still have to secure our application, our proprietary research and assets that set us apart from the competition. And so as companies have been working, several years ago, Citrix identified this as the next evolution. So in a lot of ways, Citrix has been ahead of the curve on this one in providing tools to give us not just a digital workspace, but a secure digital workspace. And they started out by asking the question, saying, all right, if we are going to empower users to work from anywhere, and that has been the Citrix mantra for years, any user on any device from anywhere at any time, that's the 4 any's, any. Citrix says, doesn't matter what, wherever your users happen to be. If they're working in the office, great. If they have to work from home because for whatever reason, a childcare challenge or a convenience, the cable guy is coming on Tuesday, right? And we have to meet them at the door and let them in, kind of thing. So some of those accommodations have come up, but also that work from home. There are situations where, for example, my parents are, at the time, we're living 2,000 miles away, and I had to go spend some time with them. I was able to take my work with me 2,000 miles away, and granted, it was three time zones away, so my work schedule was a little different than their life schedule, but we made it work for the week that I needed to be there for them. So, but the question still stands is, and it's this: what is needed to extend the security of the workspace to the location of the worker? In other words, back in the traditional workspace, everybody was in the building, everybody was using the internal network or the LAN, the local area network, and that one point of access to the internet was managed through a firewall. And we could safeguard that and keep it, put a security team on that, and ensure a high measure of security. We don't have that anymore, but we still have the responsibility to extend that security out to where the users are. So think about your remote workforces. Where are they? Everybody's at home. So if we had 1,000 users that used to come to the office, now we have 1,000 different points of entry for bad actors and security threats. And we need to extend some measure of protection out to them. And so when we think about the elements, what Citrix has determined in 4 areas. They determined that we need to have some secure application delivery. Not just the application, but also the network. How do we secure the network for that data in motion? How about where we store the data at rest? And finally, what about the endpoint? Is there any way that we can constrain the endpoint or provide some measure of management to them? Another challenge in endpoints is, of course, whether it's a bring your own device situation or an employee is using a corporately issued asset. And so putting those together, Citrix gives us this diagram of a secure digital perimeter going around what is termed the workspace. And the workspace consists of the applications that the user will work with, the content they will consume, and the devices that they will use for that. And so bringing those three into the same picture so that we can holistically approach that are the tools that Citrix provides. Now, with regard to the applications, Citrix doesn't provide the applications per se, but they provide the framework for sharing those applications and securing those applications so that they are protected while they are being used. We'll see there with the content as well, that the content needs to be stored in a secure location as well. Whether we continue to do that in an on-prem data center, or as we've seen this trend over the last 5 to 10 years, this increase in popularity moving toward the cloud has grown. And the cloud provides for some very attractive possibilities, particularly as we consider the further implications of a remote workforce. If there is no need to come to a building, then there is no need for the building. But what else did we have in the building? Well, we had a data center. Is there any way we could get the data center out of the building and thus eliminate the capital expense of a building or the operating expense of a building lease? And the answer to that is yes, the cloud. And that's one of the big drivers behind the popularity of cloud. But then that'll also beg the next question, can we secure the cloud? Because after all, if everybody is touching the cloud, what assurance do I have that I can maintain the same level of security that I did in a traditional workspace with a traditional data center in my physical building? And that has been successfully answered by the major cloud providers, they being Microsoft Azure, Amazon's AWS, Google Cloud, and others have offered secure solutions and can provide those also in a service level agreement to instill that confidence. And as an aside, when it comes to the cloud, when we step back and look at it, each of those cloud providers employs more cloud security professionals than most companies have on their entire IT staff. So if you think about your IT organization or your IT staff, how many people are dedicated to the security task? 2, 3, maybe 4? Well, I can assure you that those cloud vendors such as Microsoft and Amazon have hundreds of security professionals ensuring the integrity of the cloud, because if they couldn't do that, then nobody would be subscribing. And I grant that there are some cultural concerns. There are also some regulatory challenges in trying to move the data center to the cloud, but it is something worth considering as we move forward in this new era of remote work. And then also the devices we mentioned, whether they are going to be corporate issued or whether we continue to allow users to do a bring your own. I think as devices grow in popularity and commonness, as it were, we'll want to look for more of the bring your own device solutions and recognize that there'll have to be a way of creating a secure partition within the bring your own device or the BYOD platform that a user brings, and carve out just a bit of corporate space that corporate doesn't have to manage the entire device. That's one of the shortcomings of the BYOD approach, is that it used to be an all or nothing. That is, if you enrolled your device into the BYOD solution, corporate demanded that they have the authority to reset the entire device, which has led to some dramatically disastrous results. Current solutions in this space don't go for the whole device, but rather a partition. And as long as we can secure a partition within the device, that's enough for corporate to have reset control over, so as to not compromise the integrity or the security of the data. So as we look at what needs to happen in order to provide a secure solution out to our users, we see that Citrix has already done a lot of thinking in this space and has matured considerably, consistently leading in the Gartner quadrants. Citrix solutions offer a robust approach to the idea of a secure digital workspace in the areas of things like application delivery, network security, data storage, and endpoint management. You'll note that with each one of these bullets, there is a parenthetical remark as to what the product was formerly referred to as. So it tells you something that Citrix has been around long enough with these different pieces that they've brought them together to provide a unified solution. And in that respect, Citrix is unique. That is, Citrix can deliver the application resources through their Citrix Workspace experience, as well as their classic Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktops product, which you may formerly remember as Zen App or Zen Desktop if you've been around long enough. In the network security space, Citrix has networking technologies that position around a firewall or near a firewall and function similarly. What used to be called the NetScaler, or now Citrix ADC and the Citrix Gateway, which the gateway technically is a function integrated into the Citrix ADC. So we'll be talking about the Citrix ADC platform for that. With regard to data storage, where do we keep this data safe? Do we keep it on-prem or do we have cloud storage? Can we integrate both? And the Citrix Files solution, formerly known as ShareFile, does provide for integrating multiple storage locations to be presented in a unified fashion. And finally, with regard to endpoint management, Citrix does give us tools through their endpoint management piece, which was something they grew beyond Zen Mobile, which was something that Citrix has acquired and continued to develop in the last 6-7 years. So let's take a look at some of these things. First of all, with the Citrix Workspace, the idea behind Citrix Workspace is to provide a single pane of glass where a user can come in and connect to everything they need, the application resources, maybe a Windows desktop for having a full desktop experience, as well as any of the files that they would be working on. Now, what I appreciate about the screenshot here, and this is a screen grab from the, I was going to say current, but with icons like QuickBooks 2017 and Excel 2016. So the graphic is a little bit dated, but the interface is actually very similar to what we're seeing here in this shot. And the idea of the Citrix Workspace is everything that a user needs in order to operate within the environment that we set. So the user experience becomes greatly simplified. That the applications that we are going to provide them are shared out to them. And you'll notice in these applications, it's not just traditional desktop apps, but you'll see other things like you see Salesforce in the slide here. So the integration of SaaS apps, and then that lends itself to the thought, well, can we do single sign-on? And the answer is yes. So we're also simplifying the experience from that security standpoint. You'll see down below the apps, there's the desktops that are being offered. If a user wants to launch a Windows app or I'm sorry, a Windows desktop, or possibly even a Linux desktop, Citrix does provide the ability to offer both. And then finally, down below at the bottom, you see the files that are listed there. And what's really cool about this is that if all the storage locations are defined and indexed, there is that search bar across the top. We see the, let's see, there we go. And this search bar at the top where a user can enter in the search term and the search results will pull up. So again, simplifying the user experience so that they can come in and immediately be empowered to get all the work done that they need to do, regardless of where in the world they happen to be. Now, once we attach all of these resources and provide a single place to access them, a couple other things step up in here. One is the ability to attach workflows. So say, for example, a user's working, I see there's a TED presentation, the TED Talk slide deck showing up here in the, and if I've got one user working on it and needs to send it over to graphics, then you can send an email with a link to it and get that back. But for things such as expense reports, we could submit those and create a workflow around them that they go to the supervisor approves them, go off to accounting in order for reimbursement. So that's some pretty neat things there with regard to adding in workflows. Observe over here that the drop down from the application remembers some of the most recently used files. So for quicker access back to where a user may have left off from the previous work session. A lot of these tools designed to simplify the user experience and empower them. Now, this might be too much of a view, so Citrix does offer both a files view if we just wanted to focus on files and then leverage locally installed applications, or if we want to provide the applications from a central location, we can offer the workspace view of both the files and the application resources. All right. Now, one other thing I would point out is that within the last couple of years, Citrix has also expanded this because they've showed you applications, desktops, files. Citrix has also created an API or an application programming interface, a framework for creating micro apps in order to pull data from other feeds or sources to be integrated into this workspace experience. So the possibilities here, well, quite literally, are limitless. It's based on what your organizational needs and requirements are. What type of communication do you want to provide in to your users? All right, so that's a little bit about the workspace experience and the application resources. The next area I want to talk about with regard to empowering our remote users is through the notion of network access. When we think that a user sitting wherever they happen to be has to traverse a network in order to access resources, we think about all the different types of resources and applications that they might have to access. So for example, getting out to the internet, there may or may not be some web filtering. In a traditional workspace, a lot of times there is some active filtering in order to block access to, well, so let's just call them unproductive sites. In other words, I'm not paying users to do X, Y, and Z, such as online shopping and other categories. There may also be some proxy access to enterprise apps, or even going through some sort of single sign-on interface. Well, instead of having 3 different paths to the resources, through Citrix Gateway, we can aggregate the access point to a single spot, and through single sign-on, provide access for users to these other resources. So whether it is some sort of internal web application, we have an intranet that we use for communication. Maybe there's a clientless application like SharePoint that we have established in our environment, or perhaps single sign-on to external applications such as Salesforce. And so being able to leverage a single sign-on to connect a user out there is pretty cool. And so the access control features that Citrix provides through their ADC appliance and the gateway functionality on there go a long way in simplifying the user experience. Instead of expecting a user to have multiple shortcuts or bookmarks, one to get inside, one to go to Salesforce, one to go to a third application, one to get to SharePoint, we can bring them all into a single point and log on so that they have that single sign-on. No, not only that, but we can also, through that gateway, support multi-factor authentication. And so it says here 3 pieces of information: name, password, and domain, but it could be any set of information that we want. Typically with 2-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication, we're finding out that username and password plus an authenticator app on a smartphone, it seems to be the way to go. So we dial up an authenticator app and proceed accordingly. Maybe you've got some other third 2-factor auth solution, but that can be well integrated using the Citrix ADC. And through that single sign-on, have access to all the resources, including SaaS applications. Here's a quick sampling of some of the SaaS applications that Citrix has out-of-the-box integrations with. And perhaps you can see on this some of the ones that you might be working with already. Some of you already have implemented Slack in your environments, or Dropbox, or Salesforce is already up there. But yeah, SAP, now you name it. But these are one of, and by the way, I find it kind of amusing that one of the smaller icons on this slide is Office 365. Office 365 is a big part of a lot of organizations today, and it seems to be a good future direction for many others. In fact, Citrix has written extensively on the proper integration of the Citrix Gateway with Office 365, so to facilitate that workflow. So let me just pause here for a moment and recognize what Citrix has given us. They've given us the means to present a user with a single place to log on and a single point of access for all the application and desktop resources they might need, as well as the file resources. And so that is a pretty good spot for them to be in. Not only that, but again, Citrix has been doing this rather consistently over the last 10+ years, but they further refined that Secure Digital Workspace over the last 5 years in particular, as they've sharpened their focus. And thankfully so, because although nobody predicted a pandemic for 2020, Citrix did see the trend moving toward the remote workforce. And so now with its presence, or with the reality of it hitting now, it's nice to see that we have a mature set of tools as far as that goes. So as far as the end user experience, what are users looking at? Well, there's a couple other pieces I want to point out here. And with regard to the end user experience, something called the Secure Browser Service. I want to highlight this for just a moment. Depending on what you have as security requirements, you may have a different degree of tolerance for what a user does inside of a browser or during a session. And so whether this security is, whether you choose to implement this in this level of enhanced security, which allows a user to open websites in a standard browser, or you are concerned about the types of websites they may go to, and you may choose to allow it or deny it, or redirect to something called the Secure Browser Service. The Secure Browser Service is a pretty slick offering from Citrix, and it's part of the Citrix Cloud subscription. Now, you may have heard some things about the Citrix Cloud subscription. Citrix Cloud, as a subscription, allows you to integrate multiple Citrix services in an offering to your users. One such service, in addition to the traditional virtual apps and desktop service, the gateway service, the workspace experience, another thing that can be offered through that Citrix Cloud is a secure browser service. Essentially, what a secure browser service does, is it takes the URL that the user wants to reach, and it opens a browser window in the cloud for the user, and essentially facilitates an HDX connection. HDX is the Citrix proprietary protocol, kind of like RDP, but way better. And this is the protocol formerly known as ICA, by the way. So establishing a remote access session effectively. So I get my video and I send up my keyboard and mouse to the secure browser service. And then on behalf of the user in that connection, the secure browser service will then go to the specific website called for in the URL. Now, what this does is it creates an arm's length distance so that if that particular website has been compromised, the compromise reaches only as far back as the secure browser service, and then Citrix can simply dispose the window for the session, and the threat does not reach your internal network. And so the secure browser service gives us a safer way to browse websites in the event that we are unsure as to the security or the integrity of the website. But again, that is part of the Citrix Cloud experience, and a very, very cool thing as well. The Citrix Endpoint Management is another cloud-based component, part of the Citrix Cloud subscription that we can engage, and it allows for mobile device management, mobile application management, identity management, content management of our resources and services. And as you can see here in this lovely, I guess, modern art type of a string map here, trying to demonstrate all the interconnectivity between all of these different components, we see that that again, true to their mantra of any user, any device, anywhere, anytime, that Citrix has solutions not only for the Windows platform, but also Mac OS, iOS, Android, even extending out to things like Raspberry Pi. We'll see IoT integrated into this as well. And the idea behind Citrix Endpoint Management is to empower administrators to be able to take full inventories of the environment, to be able to secure the environment, to set rules, publish applications that have a micro VPN that connect back into our corporate data centers and allow for secure access within the application. So if you're familiar with VPNs or virtual private networks, over the years, it's been an all or nothing proposition. Typically, if a user wants secure access to an internal network, they would VPN in, and then the entire connection would go through. But when a user is using a personal device, such as a smartphone, and they connect, it's not necessarily that we want every personal function to be routed through the corporate network. Privacy and bandwidth concerns aside, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. And so the idea of split tunneling has been around for several years as well, where we can define which traffic goes into the tunnel. Well, Citrix Endpoint Management allows us to facilitate tunneling at the application level so that the device can remain as it is, but when that managed application is launched, a VPN is created back to our enterprise network or our internal corporate network for the purpose of data exchange. It's a very powerful platform. It allows us to create policies around applications such as geofencing. We can restrict an application to operate only within a certain radius of our location. We can do some device management. So if we do want to enforce some policies about locking a device and requiring passcodes on devices, there is the remote wipe feature that I'd mentioned earlier. But again, as time marches on, there's a bit more refinement in that space as to being able to just remote write only the corporate partition as opposed to the entire device. All right, so with respect to these components, we've seen that Citrix has given us a lot of tools to create an experience that allows a remote user, that allows our remote workforce rather, to connect and continue to work without compromising the integrity of our environment. But how do we know for sure that that environment is safe and secure and it's up to its job? Is there any way that we can report on this and get some feedback to make sure that things are as advertised or that they are continuing? And the answer to that is yes. And this is in the space of Citrix Analytics. Citrix Analytics is another component of Citrix Cloud. This is something that if you were to go to, in fact, you could go out there, citrix.cloud.com, and you could sign up for a 30-day trial account of Citrix Cloud and just experiment with and play with and see the demos. Citrix Analytics has one such demo that allows you to see the types of analytics that are collected on the operation of your environment, the performance of your environment, and the security of your environment. So with Citrix Analytics, it would be a matter of adding that cloud to your cloud subscription and then directing your Citrix components to feed the data into this analytics tool. Now, when I say that, people are like, so you're telling me to take performance data and ship it up to the cloud? Yes. Once again, as a cloud vendor, Citrix is going to ensure the integrity and security of your data. And it's used only for your statistical purposes. I think you can opt into sharing some of that data, some of the non-identifiable data with Citrix so that they can improve their products as well. But as far as concerned, they will retain up to 13 months worth of data, 13 months so that they can do a month over month or year to date or year by year, year over year comparison, and then discard the data after 13 months. But if you were to ever choose to exit Citrix Analytics, they would delete your data within 30 days. Now, the idea of sending your data up to Citrix for their analytics is because they leverage machine learning to pour through all of the log files and all the performance data that's sent up, so that through monitoring that, they can determine the users who exhibit behavior patterns that are considered risky or volatile. So if a user suddenly is attempting to download large quantities of data during off hours, that's one of two things. Either it's a bad actor or somebody who forgot their presentation was due tomorrow, and suddenly there's this inflow. So that would at least give us a dashboard or a sense of what to investigate in the next day. So seeing a dashboard lit up like this, and again, the areas of being able to look at security and performance and operations of the environment. Even this, it's interesting. One of the challenges of working with Citrix Cloud, or for that matter, any cloud product, is the frequency of updates. And I can tell you that this actually is a screenshot from a couple of years ago, because there is another category. This interface looks slightly different. And so Citrix continues to improve that. So for those of you that are hearing Citrix Cloud quite a bit, there are some strong benefits there in terms of the latest, greatest features being introduced through the Citrix Cloud services first, before they can make their way to the on-prem version of the product. But the bottom line is that with the Citrix toolset, we have the ability to provide for the storage of data in a secure fashion, to provide for the delivery of applications, both proprietary and off the shelf, provide single sign-on access to these resources, as well as SaaS applications and others. And all the while in communicating with this infrastructure, we have networking tools that secure that data in motion. So all in all, Citrix gives us a robust solution for empowering our remote workforce to continue to be productive in a day and age where productivity has been challenged due to the circumstances that we find ourselves in with this pandemic. In conclusion, I just want to offer for some additional reading. If you want to read up a little bit more on Citrix's digital workspace, the link is posted here on the slide, as is some case studies with the Citrix Workspace application. There's some pretty good things that you can read through. And in those case studies, you can find them broken down by your industry or vertical and type of organization. Now, as far as going forward, one of the things here at New Horizons we are happy to provide are a number of Citrix training courses, and I've listed just a sampling of them here. These are courses that I do particularly enjoy teaching, and I'm sure that in the not too distant future we'll cross paths in one of these. But speaking of the Citrix Cloud, a good way to get an understanding of Citrix Cloud itself would be to take that CXD 252 course. And we have an upcoming date on that, I believe, coming up in November. But anyways, you can check our website at newhorizons.com. Again, those of us here in Toronto, it's toronto.newhorizons.com, or be happy to have you there. But the first course to get acquainted with Citrix technologies would be that CWS 215 course in the middle there, the Virtual Apps and Desktops Administration, where we look at both the on-prem and the Citrix Cloud, which differ very, very slightly. And that's a good 5 days to get your arms around this product. If you've never worked with the Citrix technologies before, that would be the place to start. If you already have familiarity with the Citrix product line and you're looking to understand the data in motion component or the gateway part, the CNS 222 comes highly recommended. They've recently revised that. That'll now be the CNS 227. We'll be updating our website here in a couple of days to reflect the new title. But the CNS 222 or 227 will take you through the essentials of managing a Citrix ADC. And we spend the last 2 days focused on the gateway function, so a soup to nuts type of a thing. And with that, I'm going to break out into just pop my screen up here. And what we have on screen now is a this is shared out. And we'll try that again. Oops. There we go. So my screen should be showing that, but I don't think it is. Let's try one more time. Fascinating.
Just to let you know, Halaf, we're looking at a visualizer UGW_gateway. So
perfect. That's exactly what I want you to see then. Thank you, Maria.
No problem.
I was concerned. My little preview window here of what you see isn't showing that, so I'm glad you're seeing that. Hopefully it's getting out there. It's going to take a bit to redraw, I grant. But what I have here is, in fact, I can back out of the visualizer here. And this is the management interface of the Citrix ADC. This is where I would go to secure that data in motion. And what I have here in the environment currently, there we go, it's taking a minute to redraw, is the configuration. Now, when I click on it to bring up the visualizer, what this visualizer shows is the single point of entry, or the single sign-on, happening here. So that's our single sign-on, and we're being offered an authentication experience, which currently is LDAP. So we're just using a simple LDAP authentication to allow a user to sign in at a single spot. And the way that this particular gateway is configured is that we do have our internal clientless applications. That's WebRed is just a token placeholder for an internal website. And we also have the Exchange server listed there as well. We also have the integrated, says there's in-apps and desktops, so the Citrix virtual apps and desktops resources being offered or presented out as well. And so what this does then is it allows for a user to sign in. And let's go ahead and go to the external client. And I'm going to go ahead and click the log on button. And this is what an external user could experience. I'm going to draw attention up here to the top and show that we're using a secure connection. So we're traveling on 443 to get to our gateway, to get to this logon point. And once I sign in, it's going to, I'll pause it here for a moment here. We can offer an endpoint analysis. Now, I've got the lab a little bit off. It's not quite where I would have it in production. But just to point this out, the endpoint analysis requires that the machine manage a certain level of configuration in order for logon to proceed. So another way of saying this is I could set up a policy that if a user is not running antivirus, then I don't let them in. Or if I do let them in, I'm going to push them over to a quarantine network. So these are all tools that Citrix gives me and puts at my disposal so that I can consider the needs of my environment. That one away there. But here I've logged on and I have access to these applications. Now I've got the storefront experience. I don't have the full workspace experience installed on this machine here for demo purposes. But from here I could log on. There are the rest of my applications and so forth. So let me go ahead and I'm going to log off as this user and log on as a different user. Instead of HR1, let's see here if I log on as user 1. And might have a slightly different experience. Yes. All right. Now, in this case, this is a little bit rough because this is for demo purposes. But when a user logs onto the gateway, I, as the administrator, could dictate one of these experiences for them, or they can choose the experience. I've left it up to the user choice, whether to offer full network access, which would connect with the gateway plugin. In other words, that would be like a full VPN. Clientless access would give me access to my clientless applications. And the virtual app and desktop access was what you just saw a moment ago with direct access into my Citrix resources. So I click on clientless access, and I can see that these are the applications that have been published. Now, Excel really isn't a clientless application. Excel is actually client-based application because I'm going to have to launch whatchamacallit here, the Workspace app, formerly known as Receiver, on my machine. But if I were to click on the blue server, and I have to click harder, there we go. Oh, I got a gateway timeout. So clientless VPN is not quite there. I think it was flipped to demo Excel. Can I be able? No, can't start Excel. Okay. So there's a couple other wonky things going on, but at least it brings me to this point here where I can see that I grant users access to these resources, and they can proceed from there. All right. So with that, we're just going to go ahead and wrap up. I believe, do we have any questions at this point in time?
No, not at the moment. I was just going to let everyone know, please take a moment to type in your questions in the questions section, and we can get to them in a few minutes. I mean, Halaf, you did such a great job just presenting this information. So just want to let everyone know while you're just typing your questions, if you're interested in the material that was just presented today, or what's in this webinar, just contact your local center for more information. You can log on to newhorizons.com, do a quick zip code search for the center that's nearest you. Just so you all know that New Horizons, we've been delivering online classes since 2001, and a lot of our instructors and our facilitators are trained to engage our learners and encourage class participation. A good example is with our leadership and development courses, we have nearly 50 to 60 post-class resources for you just as a guidance and help you with your continuous learning even long after the class. Also, as mentioned earlier, this is a month-long series we have in terms surrounding cybersecurity awareness. So please log onto our website as well to take a look at what's coming down the pipe. We have a chock-packed month-long series full of great information surrounding cybersecurity. So hopefully we can see you on another one of our sessions. And also another reminder, just for this session alone, we will be sending out a recording link so you can share, review, or pass on to anyone who may have missed the session. At the moment, we don't have any questions. Halaf, you did such a great job just going through how Citrix technology can help secure our workspace. So if we don't have any questions at the moment, with that being said, we can end a few minutes early. A few minutes early, and just a question that did come in. Yes, the recording will be shared. So not a problem. You'll be getting that later today. All right.
Well, wonderful.
Again, thank you again for presenting on behalf of New Horizons, Halaf.
My pleasure.
Always a joy to have you. Thank you everyone again for joining us. With that, you may now log off. Thank you.